Today we're going to look at SDG 15 in closer detail. We're going to look at some key concepts and what is the spirit and what is the message and the challenges behind SDG 15. But before doing that, I'd like to invite you to join me in making a little tour on global forest ecosystems to see their beauty, their magic, their relevance to so many societies worldwide and to all of us that live in this planet. So join me. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this tour that we have provided to you through these different terrestrial ecosystems, different forests throughout the world, which is so important for all of us. And I'd like to invite you to go through the main targets of SDG 15. But I'd like to explain a little bit what is behind it. So there are 9 targets. Remember, out of the 17 goals, each goal has a certain number of targets. And these targets have indicators. And now we're going to go through those 9 targets related to terrestrial ecosystems. The first one is to ensure by 2020 the conservation and restoration and sustainable use of terrestrial and inland freshwater so that they provide services and they provide products to all societies involved. And important to note here that inland freshwater is seen as part of terrestrial ecosystems. Rivers are important. Take the case of the Amazon. We have here something called Igapó forests, which are flooded forests. And during part of the year, all the fish go inside these forests and feed on fruits, on insects, and on all kinds of living creatures. And this is essential for their life strategies. So terrestrial ecosystems and freshwater ecosystems are very much interconnected. Number 2, the second target, again by 2020, promote the implementation of sustainable management on all types of forests and halt deforestation and degradation, and increase afforestation and restoration globally. So that means that all these forests which are either damaged by improper use or that are not being sustainably managed, there is a target to move in the direction of sustainable use of those forests and restoration of those ecosystems. Number 3 is a focus on the desertification and restoration of land and soil. It's the challenge of combating desertification, which is a major issue in specifically some parts of the world, like in Africa around the Sahara Desert, in the dry lands of Latin America. We have dry lands in the northeast of Brazil, we have dry lands in North America, and in many other parts of the world, in Asia as well. So combat desertification is critical because desertification leads oftentimes to degradation of freshwater ecosystems and increasing drought and floods affected by this process. Number 4 is to ensure the conservation of mountain ecosystems. And here is something very critical, because mountain forests are essential to protect the watersheds that oftentimes begin in mountains, and so protection of these mountains is essential. And we have cases in Asia, for example, in Nepal, in the headwaters of the rivers, in the slopes of the Himalayas. It's very essential to maintain these forest ecosystems for the products relevant to the societies living in that region, but also for those living downstream that benefit from the protection of soil and water in those catchment areas. Number 5 is to take action to prevent the extinction of threatened species. There are a number of threatened species, especially in ecosystems which are subject to fragmentation, which require urgent action. Number 6 is sharing benefits. It's a target which focuses on the distribution of benefits, and especially those associated with genetic resources, in a way that it's not restrictive, keep poor people included in those benefits. Number 7 is a focus on poaching and trafficking and illegal wildlife products. So it's to take urgent action to end those activities of both flora and fauna species. Number 8 is by 2020 introduce measures to reduce the impact of invasive alien species, which oftentimes, as a result of travel and movement of materials, create all kinds of disruption in natural ecosystems as a consequence of alien species becoming invasive and displacing native species from those terrestrial ecosystems. Number 9 is to integrate ecosystem biodiversity values into national and local planning, because the mindset of planners is usually controlled and historically led by economists who, for most of the time, didn't have the appropriate understanding of the value of biodiversity. Not only the value per se, but also even in economic sense, that protecting those forest ecosystems is economically relevant for the development of countries. So it's very important to integrate in the planning at the national and local level the use of biodiversity. This integration means that we need to mobilize financial resources for conservation and for sustainable use. So integrating these issues in the national and local planning is a key part of a strategy to secure appropriate financing for forest conservation, forest management. And I'd like to go through some key concepts of forest ecosystems. The first one is forest dynamics. The forests are not static. They are extremely changing over time. Forests go through a history of disturbances, natural disturbances over millennia, and also anthropogenic disturbances. So it's very important to look at these ecosystems not as museum pieces, but rather as dynamic entities that interact over time, that are constantly changing. So that's concept number 1. Concept number 2 is resilience. Forests are vulnerable to many threats. One can think of human-induced threats, such as illegal logging, illegal extraction of different products, and also climate change-related threats. And here, I think the most critical one is, and most obvious one, is forest fires. We have forest fires throughout the globe, We have those in North America, in the West Coast, which are very well known. We have in Australia, we have in parts of the Amazon, in the Congo Basin, basically throughout the world. And it's very important to increase the resilience of forests to those threats. And there are a number of ways, and we're going to explore some of these in future chapters of this course. Another concept that I'd like to talk to you is about storage of carbon. Forests play a very important role in storing carbon. There are some 650 billion tons of carbon stored in forests. So it's a huge component of a strategy to combat climate change, to not only maintain those carbon stocks in existing forests, but also to sequester more carbon through forest growth and through forest restoration. And as you can see in this table, there is distribution of carbon in most terrestrial ecosystems, which are extremely variable, and you have tropical forests, temperate forests, and these different types of forest ecosystems with different carbon stocks. But all of them are part of a very important equation of climate change. The fourth concept I'd like to talk to you is biodiversity conservation in forests. Forests are the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystems on Earth. They house a large number of birds, mammals, insects, and all kinds of creatures that are so relevant, not only to maintain those ecosystems functioning well, but also they are important reservoirs of genetic material that can be used for food, for medicine, and for all kinds of human needs. Biodiversity is essential for our future in terms of keeping nature functioning and also in terms of the uses that we can make of this biodiversity. And here we close with a vision that forests are variable worldwide, they're very heterogeneous, they play very important roles, and we have these key concepts that are essential to understand the roles that forests play in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to wrap up this chapter reminding how many challenges we have in relation to forests and how the SDG framework provides a comprehensive approach divided into 9 targets related to forests and other terrestrial ecosystems that are essential elements to reach the Sustainable Development Goals.